there's a misconception that in dealing with digital evangelism and follow-up is that you're going to deliver to me a lead that is ready to sit in my church on Sunday and write a tithe check or write an offering check. And that's not the case. These people don't care about your church, which is something I always love to tell pastors, because
how's that go over?
some of them get it, and most of them don't. But we get a lot of pastors that are just like, I'm too overwhelmed with this. This is too much all at once. And it's like, well, that's why you need a team. And I don't know how to have this conversation online. It's like, well, how would you have it if they walked down to the front of the sanctuary at the end of service and said, here's all these things happening in my life. What do I do?
Said the same thing, but it was in person.
Yeah, it's, well, what would you say? Well, I'd probably take them out to lunch or take them to coffee. Great, do that. That's the thing that you should do with these people. It's no different than a real conversation is what we tell them. We try to provide some resourcing, but we don't want to get into the space of what a seminary is supposed to be doing or what on-the-job training is supposed to be doing. These guys got into this line of work for a reason, which is to impact the community that they're a part of. And if that's engaging with the people in the community in a very, very real way.
Welcome back to the Digital Ministry Podcast. We took a little bit of a break over the holiday season. Why? Because everybody would rather spend time with their families than to join me on a podcast. And I can't blame them. But we got a special treat for you today. The first guest of 2025 is family, which is why I was able to set this up, because the only people that would respond to my podcast requests over the holidays were my family. Bryce Runyon is chief of staff of some department at Gloo, which we'll talk about a little bit, product owner. But more importantly, Bryce has served in several roles that have brought him to where he is today, including at one point full-time missionary church planner in North Africa. And we got to work together a little bit when we were both at Christian Vision, which was awesome in a lot of respects, so many ways. We did all kinds of fun things. But what I want to say about you, Bryce, in this intro, this is my most long-winded intro. You should be honored.
Yeah, thanks.
Of any guest ever. I would say, and I've told you this to your face before, you are one of the best operators that I have ever met. I mean, if you are a leader listening to this and you're looking for somebody that can take the vision of a leader to reality, like implement it, understand the people, not only the people relationally, but like the systems that need to be in place to support those teams. I've never seen anybody do it better than Bryce. And I've worked with probably hundreds. I don't think quite 1,000 different people in the different companies that I've been in, but the many, many hundreds of people. Bryce, you're one of the best I've ever seen. So I'm excited about this conversation today.
Thanks.
And I'm excited to get into specifically, you've done a ton of work in like the follow-up aspect, but also the digital ministry, like the outreach side. You've really done it all. And there are very few people like you. So thanks for agreeing to do this. And I'll see if I can get you into trouble today.
Well, the more I'm in the digital ministry space, I realize I'm probably the only person who's run a couple of departments in a poultry processing plant.
Oh, I forgot that on the resume.
Shout out to Tyson Foods. Fantastic. Used to manage the pink slime department. Look into it. It's great. It's great stuff.
It's something that I'm sure all of our American listeners have consumed at one point in time. But major exporter to China too, I might add.
Yeah. Yes.
We had some chicken feet at the house over the break. I was making like chicken broth, homemade stock. On your suggestion, by the way. The chicken feet were delicious. I couldn't get my kids to eat them, but
yep. Pack them up, ship them to China. That's what we did with them.
So if you're still with us at this point, thank you for being here. What is your official title at Gloo?
I think I'm director of reach still, okay. But in roles that I operate in, there's a chief of staff for platform and technology.
Okay.
Which is the business unit that runs Gloo app, like all of our platform and tech.
If people watch this online, you will notice that I don't have a Cardinals hat on today. And I didn't do that intentionally. I should have had it. Like, it's my go-to. But I've had several people that, are common connections. They'll jump on a Zoom call with me and they'll be like, "Oh, you got the same hat on as your brother. You guys are ridiculous." So we're working for those Cardinals season tickets as a sponsor here too on the Digital Ministry Podcast.
Yeah.
all kinds of sponsor shout outs today. I think Gloo is tremendous. It's an amazing platform and you're right in the middle of building it. We had Brad Hill on about a year ago. So, I mean, it's a fast moving organization. We're probably due for a Gloo update. You want to give us a little insight into first what it is for those that aren't familiar, but then also where are you guys going?
Yeah, Gloo's a platform and technology company that is operating in the Christian ecosystem. So churches, parachurch ministries, big organizations that serve church space. That's what we do. Build technology solutions for them. Our main one right now that's very customer facing in the market is the Gloo app, which is primarily a texting platform, but there is a lot coming to that over the next year. We're really excited about it. And we've spun up an AI division, Gloo AI, which has got some really, really cool things going. And then coming in, I should know this, let's say a few weeks, maybe a month. I don't know. We've got State of the Church, which is a big party on Gloo that's happening, which is deploying assessments to churches and to congregants in churches to understand the health of your church on the flourishing index. So that measures key flourishing metrics within a person's life, an organization's life. There's that comes from Harvard. For an organization health, I think it's 15 different points that they measure. And then for an individual, it's 5 different points that they measure. And the cool thing about that is you can take that assessment and then 6 months later you can take it again. 6 months later you can take it again. And you can track your growth journey over time. If I'm individual in a church taking one of those assessments, I can see where I'm at in terms of my relational health or emotional health or spiritual health. I can see all those things and then just kind of track what I need to lean into. And we've got all sorts of tools coming with that. There's a lot of really cool organizations involved. And so that's a big thing coming up. But my main area of focus is platform and tech. And so we've got a lot of really cool things happening there, developing some more value props for our Gloo Plus product, which is we've got the free level, which includes a lot of texting, and then Gloo Plus, which includes a myriad of benefits to it. So that's
I hate that word.
mm,
We'll edit it out.
There's
Go
a
ahead.
myriad. There's a lot. There's a myriad. That's how it's
A
written on the
cornucopia.
website. It's a cornucopia. It's a plethora of. Would you say we have a plethora of offerings? Yes, I guess I would. That's exciting. That's what I do.
You guys, yeah, you're moving fast. Saw some acquisitions announced this week, which is exciting in the AI space. But I really wanted to dig into a bunch of questions that I hear come up all the time, and we'll see how spicy this gets.
Okay.
So, follow up is super interesting. Like it's a paradoxical problem. Reach is kind of where everybody starts. It's like how do I reach more people? But what happens when people start to respond to whatever message you're putting out there? They start asking questions. It's not like clean and easy. It's not clinical in any way. People are messy. It's a phrase that's kind of fallen out of vogue recently, but they are. Like people
Yeah.
come with all their junk. They got hard questions. And kind of the hope right now is that AI can help maybe automate some of that stuff. But really, like when you're talking about the gospel or connections to churches or ministry related even activities, people don't want like an auto response. They want to talk to somebody who can help them. I'd love to get your thoughts on it's really easy to outpace your capacity to handle all of that inflow of questions or texting or whatever. I mean, how are people dealing with that these days?
Like the volume that's coming into them,
Mm-hmm.
primarily a team of people. That's kind of one of our first go-tos when a church comes on to receive an explorer is to build a team around you, right? Because if you've got the general public coming through your ad funnel and responding to whatever landing page you have set up or whatever piece of content that you have out there, it's general population advertising. It's not like we're not really targeting super specific stuff. We've always like we did at CV, we kind of ride on the coattails of felt needs because everybody's got a problem. And at any given moment, they're in that cycle, that bell curve of crisis where, they're just kind of skipping from one crisis to the next. We're all doing that. That's, the human condition.
And then your search
Um,
patterns kind of mirror that as well. It's like, oh,
yeah.
my kid's sick. What is this? Like Google symptoms or whatever.
Yeah. And so, which means you're getting anybody and everybody that can come through. It's like you look out, second story here, you see all the houses and it's like, oh man, every single roof has got a number of crises happening underneath that roof. And more often than not, people are jumping online to figure out how do I solution this thing? And so felt needs, anxiety, loneliness, depression, grief, all that stuff, you're getting everybody. And so you may get a woman, you may get a man, you may get somebody who's of one generation or a younger generation, or, so what do you need to
Different
do?
preferences and all that stuff.
Yeah. What do you do as a church? Well, you build a team because the community of church is the gateway into a solution for those individuals. And so it's like, okay, if we've got somebody coming in with marriage problems, you're going to need a marriage counselor, right? Maybe you can do that as a pastor. Great. Got, some young kid coming in saying, I'm dealing with bullying at school, right? Well, best case scenario is you have a youth pastor that can handle that. You have somebody coming in asking questions about faith. Well, what do? You need an outreach pastor for that, right? So most churches are equipped with those individuals, whether they're formally on staff or they're volunteers, which is something that we encourage, is to get staff and volunteers involved in this, because when somebody gets connected through any system into the local church, it is, like I said, it's a gateway. So all of these problems, what's the solution to all that? It's Jesus, right? They don't know that yet. And it could take a long time to build to that solution. But first they want somebody to listen to them, and they want somebody to hear about their problem, and they care about themselves and the problems that they're going through. They don't really care about your church. They just need somebody to listen.
Your program for onboarding.
Yeah. Yeah. So one of the things that we do is we tell these churches, hey, build a team. And then every time you answer the first text, you say, that sounds really hard. Tell me more about it. Right. Because it's to get them to the next step. It's a little bit like SDR. It's, it's like, how do I get them into the next step to buy this thing that I'm selling? That's a horrible way to put it, but it is
quotes there if you're not watching.
Yeah. Air quotes. It is, it's a form of nurtures and marketing. And so getting them down that funnel to a coffee, right? Get them across the table, drinking coffee or tea, whatever, and listening to their problems and caring about that explorer that has come in. That's what we call them, explorers. You care about that explorer, then they're going to start caring about you and what you're involved in and what you do and how you live your life and why you seem so happy all the time. It's like, man, this is the joy of Jesus. This is where this comes from. It's the joy of Christ changing my life and forgiving me of my sins and changing who I am. And so how do you deal with the volume? You build a team. You rely on the community that the church is. Church is built-in community. That's what a lot of these people are looking for to begin with. So it's an amazing solution.
Those teams aren't full of pastors, though. I mean, all your
Mm-hmm.
examples that you shared were like youth pastor or senior pastor, whatever. Pastors are super busy.
Yep.
So
yep. They're really busy. Volunteers, they're a fantastic solution to this. And what most of these responders need to understand, this is where I was going with this, is it's not a moment of evangelism, right? It's the start of a discipleship process. Whether they know Jesus and you need to get into evangelism, that's one thing. You need to discern that when you open the conversation with them, but it's the start of a discipleship process. And so if I'm a volunteer at a church, I'm a small group volunteer, typically a trusted member of the church. If you're leading something, right, that's kind of who your first tier of individuals that you'd want to look for, is people who are leading in the church. If I start a relationship this week, that relationship carries on to the next week and the week after that and the week after that. And I may only be able to maintain 2 or 3 of those conversations at any given time because they roll over into the next week. And so after a month on the platform, I'm getting 2 to 3 contacts a week. And that's going to roll up into a lot of time spent with these individuals because it's texting, it's meeting for coffee, it's inviting them to church eventually, it's inviting them into the small group setting. And so it takes a lot of time. And like you said, it's messy. Like people are super, super messy. That's the condition of sin that we live in. And we come with all of our stuff and we want people to listen to us. And so yeah, it just rolls up into a lot of time. So how do you deal with the volume? You build a team, you trust your community, build into your leaders and help them understand this. Ideally, in an ideal world, it's like you get every volunteer, every leader in your church involved in this, and they all of a sudden have this incredible outlet for outreach and discipleship.
I was having a conversation with a ministry, I think it was this morning actually, and they're working on this campaign. They were asking me some questions about it, and it's going really well. Like, we've been involved with this for several months now and got the performance up. They're seeing, I'm filtering here to think about what I can say about it. Among a very hard to reach population, they're seeing like an 18% response rate from first contact to a profession of faith, which is
It's really
big.
good.
I
Yeah,
mean,
that's really good.
yeah, you and I've, and that's like a long conversation, multiple steps, which eventually comes to like this point of confession. Yeah, so that's why I was telling them, I was like, this is amazing. This is good job, guys. And they were like, okay, so we have a donor that wants to seed some of this. And can we double these results? If we double the budget, can we double the results? And I'm like, maybe.
Mm.
So you can definitely double the reach, but can you maintain that type of performance? I think you have to invest in building out more people, building that team, which presents like all these, team. Now I got to go find and recruit and train a team leader. I got to make sure I have processes in place to train and onboard those team members so that they're just as effective as, as the 8 or 10 people that are working on it today. How often are you guys running into those kinds of challenges, and how are people addressing them?
The challenges of,
Like scaling success.
I mean, we go back to the team dynamic, and it's in a local church setting, it's volunteer management. We try to build tech solutions that make that stuff really easy, that make it mobile native so that it's like, I don't have to think about it. I don't have to log in a computer to engage with somebody. I'm just doing it on my phone. We
That's a
look for
cool
those.
feature.
Yeah, we look for those solutions for sure. But just the coaching, this is why we burn out in North Africa, is just, pastors, ministry workers really fall into the trap of like, I've got to do this myself. I got to be able to control the quality. It's like, no, quality is, that's an outcome of your commitment to understanding God's sovereignty. It's kind of what it comes down to, is like, no, he's in control of this, not me. I'm just doing the work and putting in faithful steps forward.
What are the blockers that you guys are running into with trying to get people on board with this concept?
The first one is always being overwhelmed. Somebody messages in and says, they've got like just a real heavy crisis happening. And there's some pastors that are just like, this is too over my head. This is something I wasn't prepared for. There's a misconception that in dealing with digital evangelism and follow up is that you're going to deliver to me a lead that is ready to sit in my church on Sunday and write a tithe check or write an offering check. And that's not the case. These people don't care about your church, which is something I always love to tell pastors, because
How's that go over?
some of them get it, and most of them don't. But we get a lot of pastors that are just like, I'm too overwhelmed with this. This is too much all at once. And it's like, well, that's why you need a team. And I don't know how to have this conversation online. It's like, well, how would you have it if they walked down to the front of the sanctuary at the end of service and said, you know, here's all these things happening in my life. What do I
Yeah,
do?
said the same thing, but it was in person.
Yeah, it's, well, what would you say? Well, I'd probably take them out to lunch or take them to coffee. Great, do that. That's the thing that you should do with these people. It's no different than a real conversation, is what we tell them. We try to provide some resourcing, but we don't want to get into the space of what a seminary is supposed to be doing or what on the job training is supposed to be doing. These guys got into this line of work for a reason, which is to impact the community that they're a part of. And if that's engaging with the people in the community in a very, very real way.
I think that's a point that's not touched on enough with people in your congregation as well. It's like, I don't think, let me say it this way. I think churches have an opportunity to call people into mission
Mm-hmm.
more than they have in recent decades.
Yeah.
It's, I mean, especially in the US, it's kind of like this: come to church on Sunday, participate, serve, all these volunteer opportunities. But when you cross over into that being a part of a follow up team, okay, now that Sunday morning service opportunity has ballooned into full week, could be 24/7 if people let it. You can't do that without having some kind of sense of mission. And when I read the Bible, I think we're all called to be on mission, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. You definitely can't forsake the gathering, right? Like that's something
Sure.
that believers are called to. We're called to participate in that community, and it's taken a certain form in North America, which I don't get super excited about. I call it the Sunday show. It just, a lot of places, a lot of times it just feels like a performance. And even me walking in and sitting there, it feels like a performance for me. It's because it's like, I got to be happy. I got to shake hands. We've turned it into something that it really shouldn't be. But yes, absolutely. There's a massive opportunity for churches to call their people into mission, which is what we're supposed to be doing, which is the time in between Sundays, right? Sunday is for the equipping of the saints. That's us, those who believe, those who've been baptized. And that's where we should be filled up and encouraged to take it out on a daily basis, Monday through Saturday, and be equipped to do this work, this calling into mission. And so we've got some of that backwards.
I think we're both filtering a little bit in this conversation. But
You're just trying to get me in trouble.
I'm not here to bash the church. Like
No,
I
not at all.
love I think the local church, and I've published this, so you can go look it up, but I think the local church is the game plan, and so it should be cared for and supported and grown. And also I've kind of been convicted recently because I share a lot of those same ideas. We talk a lot about this stuff. And in our community, I've seen a ton of people, their first introduction to faith is like a Sunday morning church visit. And they're like, "Ooh, there's something else here. There's something going on that I don't see anywhere else." And it's light in the darkness, it is attractive, so I think that is resonating with people. There's I think the church at large could do a lot better job like serving the people in our circles throughout the rest of the week, though. And that I think is a tremendous opportunity. And this is a great, being a part of a follow-up team is a great first step into that for a lot
Yeah.
of folks.
The church is the bride of Christ. If you don't love the church, then I'm going to question your faith, right? I think it's a reality. It's a biblical calling. It's part of what God set up. It is like the hope of the world. That's how God set it up. That's how Jesus set it up. And it's messy because it's full of sinful people. We all know that, right? But we can really gloss over that at times and not recognize it.
So I was with David Platt and his team with Radical recently, and they had some interesting, the purpose of this conversation, this gathering was to like really drive awareness among US believers, like unreached people groups was part of it. And I know this is, a heartbeat of yours, but one of the things that I didn't even realize, even though I've kind of been in the space and worked in a lot of those efforts for like 15 years now, over that, the majority of the global Christian population is in the global South, and it's outside of the US. And that's also where we're seeing some of the most rapid growth. Now, I want to come back to that about US kind of growth in a few minutes, but what does that mean to you? Like, what does that say to you if we're seeing the majority of new believers every year over year, are outside of the US? Yeah, mostly the global South. It's in some of these like really hard places, but just
Mhm.
massive numbers of people coming to faith. I'm like, what does that mean?
Critically, critically means we're not doing our job here in the States.
That's a very
I remember,
US
yeah,
biased response, but
yes. One of the first
we don't have to be the
conversations,
best at everything.
yeah, yeah. One of the first conversations I had with Steve Douglas, he talked about that, where he was like, yeah, I think it was before we went overseas.
Hmm.
He was like, China, Africa, South America. That's where the church is moving, right? And he's like, that's where it's growing. And the centers of Christendom will be in those places in the coming years.
Hmm.
And I mean, I can't even remember the reason the idea was brought up, but we were just kind of
Because all he did
talking.
was talk about the gospel, maybe.
Yeah, yeah. We were talking shop, and he brought that up, and it was just like, yeah, you're right. And as a believer in North America, sometimes I think that's hard for us to grasp. The other thing that should be very, very tangible and easy for us to grasp, especially here in North Texas, is the globe comes to us. And
Mm,
people have talked about this is not a new idea at all, but it's like just massive neighborhoods out here of different cultures all in one spot, and it makes it really easy. And it's like I've got mosques, I've got temples, I've got these communities of different cultures that they spring up, and that's something that we really, really need to be taking advantage of, and really understand that the Lord is orchestrating, and it's an opportunity. And the cool thing about some of these cultures is that there's Christians within them, and so you've got these cultural pockets of people that are not North American by birth or anything. They've moved here, they've immigrated here, and within those pockets, there's pockets of believers, right? And so, how do you come alongside of them? How do you support them? How do you encourage them? Because we are the church, and that's part of that function. Is like, oh yeah, I don't have to be a part of it. I don't have to, give money to it. I can just pray for it. I can find those people. I can reach out to them and encourage them. I can build relationships with them, ask them questions. How do you break through in your culture? They may not know, but maybe they need a white guy to come to one of their, one of their gatherings or one of their outreach programs to kind of be the bait. That's what we used to do that a lot in overseas. Is like, hey, we need some college kids to kind of just be the bait so that we
what
can
does that
carry on
mean?
so you get a bunch of English speaking white kids show up in a place overseas, and you go to a public place, and people just gather and start conversations.
Because
And
they're like, why are you here?
yeah, why are you here? Oh, have you met my friend? He actually lives here. You should talk to him. He'll be here, for years after I leave. And so, yeah, there's all sorts of ways to do that, but that's something we used to do.
You went with maybe you need a white guy, and I got real nervous there for a second.
Yeah. No, it's just, stick out like a sore thumb type of thing.
I got it.
Yeah. You got to use those things to your advantage.
There's a lot of different ways we take this conversation. I think that's super interesting. Well, let me ask you this: do you see much like church growth or anything like on a revival spectrum happening among those communities within the US? Because I know you've got a really unique view of like, the state of the church, even like you were talking about the report that you guys are working on. Is that happening anywhere that we should know about?
Not that I know of firsthand.
Mm-hmm.
You hear things. I haven't really experienced them. I do think the church is primed for growth. I really, really do. I think we're entering into a season where there's a lot of hunger among the youth. You've got, different cultures moving in. And so you've got second or third generation Americans that their parents have immigrated here. And,
Mm-hmm.
they look around, they notice. And part of maybe it's assimilation, maybe it's just the attractiveness of the gospel. They see a difference in that, and they're attracted to it, and it's a huge opportunity. It's a youth thing as well. I don't think it's not isolated to just people who are from other cultures, but I would say there's a younger generation here that's really, really excited about what the gospel's got, which is truth, which is love, which is hope. That's the biggest thing. It's like, get us out of this mess. What's it going to be?
I saw a report recently. This is one of the things I wanted to ask you about. We haven't talked about this previously, but I think it was in the Telegraph out of the UK, and it was talking about the attractiveness of the Orthodox Church, especially to young men. And they wrote about it as a rejection of like the femininity or the softness that they see in most Protestant churches. And this is where we're going to get we're going to get off track here a little bit. Like I thought that was super interesting because right now at the same time I'm having a conversation with a guy in our town who just came to faith, and he was like, nobody in his family is a Christian. Nobody in his circles are really a believer. We saw him at church one day. I was like, oh, I didn't know you go to church. He's like, it was my first time. And the pastor was talking about baptism. So he signed up to get baptized. He's like, I confessed belief in Christ. I was like, well, who talks that way? He's like, that's what it says in Romans. I'm like, oh
Yeah.
yeah. And he's like, and I
Paul
read
knows.
about, yeah, Paul does. He said, I read about baptism. He's like, I didn't really know what that was. And then, the pastor just happened to say it. So he was signed up to be baptized. And my wife asked him, like, well, is anybody coming like to your baptism? Are you going to invite people? He's like, nobody wants to come. I don't know any Christians. So like we were there to support him. And so anyway, we've been in this, like we meet together fairly regularly, and we're just, you've heard me ask this 1,000 times. I might have even gotten it from you. I'm like, what's the Bible say? He'll ask a question. What about this? I was like, well, what's the Bible say? We just keep going back to the Bible. But he's like exploring our local Orthodox church. He's like, I really like this. And so I've had to do like a crash course on the theology and, all this stuff. But I think kind of like the overarching, like I was surprised by all this, but apparently the Telegraph in the UK is aware. They're seeing this trend. What is that? Like, is this something you've seen as well?
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, I've seen it on a couple different levels. One is yes, there is a within Protestantism, we've got diverging tracks in terms of Calvinism and Arminianism, and so there's Calvinists tend to be a little bit more, classically Protestant. Let's call it that. And so definitely have seen that with a lot of people coming out of those other movements and just saying, Anglicanism, Presbyterianism, Lutheranism, there's an attractiveness to the order of things, which is what we're called to do out of Genesis, is to make order out of chaos. That was one of the mandates in the garden. So that's one place I've seen that. Whether or not it's a youth focused thing, I don't really know. I haven't seen that firsthand, except in the young men that we would disciple overseas coming out of a Muslim context. That's a very ordered religion. And so when they did find Jesus, they would look into these things. And so a lot of them were very, very attracted to the Catholic Church because it's high church, it's very ordered, it's very set. There's a cadence and a rhythm to it, which I do think, regardless of how ADHD anyone is, there is, an attractiveness to the order of things. And even, we're called to be orderly in the assembly. That's another thing that's in scripture. And so I think it's a little bit natural to who we are as humans. And so, yeah, that's what I've seen.
Do you think it's just an order thing though, or is it a like a rejection of something else? Because and this is all anecdotal, like but I've heard some comments recently where it's like, what used to be like a seeker approach, seeker friendly churches,
Mm-hmm.
by kind of mirroring what people were familiar with, they were comfortable to approach church. But I think there's such a rejection of so many things right now, and like the political cycle and all this stuff. So like you've got this kind of groundswell of like woke rejection that you'd have to be blind not to notice this. And
Yeah.
I'm not necessarily celebrating it either. Like I think pendulums swing, and like we tend to see the extremes on either side, which I think can be a problem. And I've heard others recently say, well, hey, don't celebrate too loud here. We're going to get a swing back the other way. And how are you going to deal with that? I mean, is it kind of maybe some of this trading incense in for fog machines? It's like I want the I want something that's more like rigorous, feels disciplined, because there's no discipline elsewhere in my life, because we live in this hedonistic culture. Like, is that part of it?
I mean, embracing of the gospel is a rejection of everything, right? And so, but I don't know why I said that. Maybe just setting context. But yes, there is a pendulum swing. And I mean, I don't necessarily want to be critical of seeker churches. We grew up in a bit of a seeker church, I would say. And they did a lot of good work. And they're still big, the seeker churches tend to be the mega churches, or maybe the only ones that we see because they're so mega. But they've done a lot of fantastic work. I mean, whole Mars Hill podcast that goes through that whole history of secret churches and where they came from and why they operate the way that they do, and the tone and the tenor of the gospel that they proclaim. And so,
That's the
you know,
Christianity Today podcast that came out a few years ago. Is that what you're talking about?
is that who did it? I
I don't
just
know
know
if it
that
was
it's
officially. I think that guy was with CT, but
okay. Yeah, I mean, it's fantastic. I loved it.
like that's a great example. That was a church. Like I gained a lot from listening to that church podcast, or they would publish their sermons online and stuff, and like I was right there with it. But then when you hear about all the other like the brand building, and this is
Sure,
why digital ministry gets tricky too, is like, what are we doing here? We're
right,
using marketing terms to talk about sharing the gospel. Like,
presenting the gospel. Yeah,
whose brand are we building?
right. Yeah, I do think though it is a pendulum swing back the other way, away from the mega church environment, and because as soon as churches get to that mega phase, what problem are they trying to solve? They're trying to solve the problem of community and getting people involved and getting them into smaller groups, right? Because people want to feel at home when they go to church because it's the community that they're operating in. You want community, that's why you go there. And so I think it was just one of those things where it was inevitable that the pendulum comes back the other way. That's the nature of a pendulum.
So this is not an endorsement of Joe Rogan or his podcast, but I've had several people share different like clips with me recently, and so I've listened to some of these episodes, including the most recent one with Mel Gibson. Did you catch this at all?
I didn't listen to that one, but I listened to the Wesley Huff one, which was amazing.
Really? I
Yeah,
didn't catch that one. He's got 19 million subscribers, and this guy publishes a podcast. I mean, as far as I can tell, multiple times a week. 19
right,
million people, multiple times a week. And I saw, actually, kind of what is leading to my question is, I saw this thread on Twitter the other day where somebody had clipped his podcast. And so they put this whole thread together and they showed this progression from like being an anti-Christian voice to now being like super curious. And the
hmm,
gospel is being straight up shared over and over and over again on the Joe Rogan podcast, including this one with Mel Gibson, which I was telling some friends about. And I was like, look, Mel's had his own kind of public disasters. And so this is the problem, right? It's tinged with all
right,
of these things that I know about Mel Gibson and his background. But I mean, he was making a compelling case for the validity of the resurrection and and Joe's like, so you believe this? He's like, yeah, no, I believe it 100%. And he was just like, it's a 2 hour long conversation about, was Jesus really raised from the dead?
yeah.
This is creating some interesting conversations publicly
Yeah,
these
I mean
days.
this Wesley Huff one was about he's a theologian out of Canada, and he had a debate online with some guy that really I went and watched the YouTube of the debate, and it was frustrating because he didn't get to make his points in the debate. It was quote unquote debate. I don't think it was real. It was just kind of sprung on this guy 24 hours before he jumped on it. But like just very, on Rogan, he ended up doing very detailed, explanation of the gospel, which was fantastic to hear.
Did you see the clip
So
of Kid Rock sharing the
no,
gospel?
uh, oh yeah. I did hear that one. I did hear that one.
I mean, he's like, Jesus died for all of our sins, and
Yeah,
he didn't come to condemn the world. He came to save the world. And Joe's like, you
yeah,
believe this? He's like, yeah, I believe it. He's
yeah,
like, he goes, I know Jesus. And Joe's like, you like personally know him? He's like, yeah. And he goes, do you want to know Jesus? I'm just like,
yeah, yeah,
I can't believe I'm listening to this.
yeah. I heard that one. That's great. Always been a Kid Rock fan.
And so, like, whatever, mess, their mess is just public. That's the only difference. I got mess.
Yeah, if I was public, it'd be a disaster.
So this has to lead to people asking more questions, though. And I'm like, what do you think the church should be doing, especially in the digital space, to just take advantage of this opportunity that seems to be presenting itself? I mean, this is a 19 million people a day or every other day or whatever it is are listening to this conversation happen. Like, you got to see Google searches spike and all this stuff around some of these questions that Joe himself is asking.
There's all the standard answers to this question of like, oh, the church has got to love people. They've got to engage in their community. They've got to, like stop with the trunk or treats. Like, go knock on your neighbor's door and invite him over for dinner. Great. Trunk or treats are great.
That's
But
one day a year, though.
it's one day a year. I will say Halloween is fantastic to meet people. Your neighborhood's all out running around. But we got to stop being so programmatic about the quote unquote services that the church offers. Yes, there's free counseling. Yes, there's soup kitchens. Yes, there's, men's group and women's group. And those are all great places for people to land after they've engaged with a member of your church.
Yeah,
Right?
somebody.
Yes. It's not the pastor's job to disciple everybody in your town. It is your job to disciple everybody around you in your sphere of influence. And so in a sense, the church needs to get out of its own way, right? But then they've really got to release the authority and the mandate of the gospel to the individuals sitting in the pews every Sunday. Like I said, Sunday, the gathering is for the equipping of the saints. And so, like, pastors really need to embrace that and understand that, they need to stand up there and be like, it is not my job. My job is right here to do this, to equip you guys to go out and do. Those people in the pews and in the congregation need to stop expecting that is the primary function of the pastor. The pastor is a shepherd of the flock, and the flock is the one that is sent out.
Haven't we kind of set that expectation, though?
Haven't we?
Yeah. I mean, isn't the expectation... I quoted you the other day. I said, you win people to what you win them with, which I first heard from you. And you probably heard it from Dad, so no, I'm just... Our dad's great, by the way. Something else I was thinking, like, he always used to tell us, is like, your job is not to be liked. I find myself, or like necessarily liked or accepted. Your job is to live a life that honors and glorifies God. And don't be surprised when people reject that,
Yeah.
I hear myself telling that to my kids now, but if you win them to what you win them with, and we've won people to church, and I'm saying that specifically with seeker-friendly techniques, how do we turn a corner and like really equip people and send them out? And the other thing I'll say here is that I'm hearing this from a lot of pastors, and I think and not only pastors, but people in the congregations, that like they want this too. Like, people want their life to have a mission and a purpose. And like, you have one. Read the Bible. You can see clearly what it is.
Yeah.
But like, how do we ramp that up?
I don't know. If I had that answer, I feel like I'd be really, really busy. I think
I think you're working that out though in your day-to-day job, even right now, though.
Sure. I mean, you said, haven't we set that expectation? Sure. The expectation has been set. It's been set in scripture since the beginning. That's not the reality though, right? It happens.
I think
it's just not happening at scale.
I think you kind of have to get serious about your faith on your own in church. Cause like all those groups you mentioned, men groups or whatever, Bible studies, like once people get engaged at that level, then this starts to become really clear. And those are some of the people that you see really vocal about their faith. And there's they're carrying like an empathy and a concern for others that the Lord brings into their life. Maybe that's the path. Or can we level that up?
Yeah. And I mean, that's functionally, I don't know. I guess I do know how it happens, but it's back to understanding the sovereignty of our Lord and that he is in control of things and releasing all that stuff to him on a very regular basis. And I think as believers, the only way we can accomplish that is one, through prayer, and then second, through like living out that example so that those other believers around us catch that fire and take the gospel forward. Take on discipleship opportunities. That's probably where that lands.
Yeah. There's a lot of church leaders, people that are involved working in full-time Christian work that listen to this. And I think a lot of them also carry kind of leadership responsibilities, be it volunteer or official, in whatever church they're attending and serving. I think we got an opportunity here. Like, I just want to encourage people. Like, I think that there's a hunger for mission. Like a missionless life is pretty boring and
Hmm.
seems like a waste. I think we all kind of know that internally. It's why so many people try to find purpose in their job, because you spend half your life at work. It better be something that you care about and is purposeful. But at the same time, like I can be really passionate about paper mache. I might not be able to support a family doing it.
I love that paper mache.
So like
No,
my
I think I
my
was getting ready
passions
to.
don't anyway, it's purpose. It's a purpose issue.
I was getting ready to say. I think I've been really blessed to like work in jobs that are very closely aligned with my faith and my vision and what God's given me to kind of live out.
Mm,
Working overseas or within like fantastic Christian organizations. Like can't say enough good things about them. But even at Tyson, when I was working in a factory, it's like that's pretty aligned what I set out to do in this world or what the vision that God gave me.
mm.
Why? Because there's just a bunch of people around me, right? And so I think, oh, you gotta love what you do, and this it's like God's put you there for a reason.
You
It's
had
like
some strong believers that were in management at that company too.
yeah, absolutely, and a lot of people that were from other countries that didn't know who Jesus was and never heard him,
Hmm.
and saw the underbelly of Kentucky, lived in the underbelly of Kentucky. But you know what? Like those people need the gospel. And I think that's something that we've got to recognize as believers is like, hey, you're in a job that you don't really like. You're around a bunch of people that you don't like. Tell them about Jesus and see what happens. You
If
might
you
like him more.
if you were 19 again, would you be going to be a full-time missionary overseas?
100%.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah. It was hard. It was really hard. It was really painful. Learned a lot. I was really dumb. That's the biggest factor is that Bryce was young and dumb and fantastic learning opportunity. But yeah, I mean, especially the end was very painful as well. Still is on some days,
Hmm.
but 100%, I would, yeah, I wouldn't change any of that.
So, we sent out some missionaries from our church. They're going to someplace in Asia. I know what it is, but I can't, whatever. Yeah. I was just asking myself that question. It's like, would I do this? Would I do this today? And it's not like the going piece. I'm thinking about it from like an effectiveness standpoint, but it sounds like, you'd say yes. So maybe effectiveness isn't the right lens to look through.
Yeah, that's a poor metric, I think. Uh,
What's the right
yeah,
one?
I think obedience is the right one.
I knew you were going to say that.
Yeah,
That's good.
yeah, it's obedience, whether or not you're doing exactly what Scripture says. Not just to do it and not to get that jewel in that crown. That's not what it's about. It's about serving our Lord. It's about making His name great, whether or not a single person stops and listens to you.
What's the biggest threat to digital ministry these days?
Biggest threat to digital ministry. Oh man, money is never a problem. That's from you. Content isn't the problem.
I
That's
said,
from
if
you.
you're going to quote me correctly. Uh, never worry about a money that problem that money can solve. Is what I say.
Yeah,
We
yeah,
serve the king. He's got all the money. Don't worry about it.
yeah. Just write the checks.
I tell my wife that
Um,
too, but with our budget, but it doesn't work. Or then sometimes it backfires. But
I think the biggest, to get really like philosophical on it, or maybe really meta. I don't know what the right term is there, but I mean, the biggest threat might be ourselves and not taking the opportunity.
hmm,
Like that's also, I think you got it from Steve, but it was like the world's smaller than it's ever been.
yeah, you used to say
It's
that all
like
the time.
I get I get WhatsApp messages and Facebook messages from friends that are still overseas, and it's like right there, voice recordings. You know, the world's as small as it's ever been, and so we as believers need to recognize the opportunity that the Lord's given us, and we need to take advantage of it. It's not just digital ministry. Digital ministry isn't going to save the world. It's a catalyst to something else, which is revival. It's a catalyst to life change. And so, it'd be great if we didn't need it. right? Like that's the point. That's the point of digital ministry is that it starts something, starts people group movements, and we can shut that stuff down and focus on building the church. So yeah, that's I think that's it.
What's the opportunity that people are missing? And I don't think it's
With
just the antithesis of what you just said. I think that what I'm looking for is like, what do you see that others haven't keyed in on yet that people should be looking at or doing?
it's a fantastic way to build your brand.
Yeah, sure.
um, I mean, it's the way that the world communicates, right?
It's just
Digital
a
is
channel. It's just a communication channel.
it's channel, right? And so again, like get real big, high level on it. It's like the biggest opportunity that we're missing is not being part of what God is doing, which is where, everybody should want to be. It's like, I want to be where God is moving. That's exciting. It's terrifying, but it's exciting.
I would love to see more people. And actually, you did this incredibly effectively and incredibly well at CV. It's like a parachurch organization used these digital tools as a catalyst for local church growth, like for the support and benefit of local communities, not kind of like this Air Force carpet bomb. Who knows what happens as a result, but like really from the bottom up, building a partnership. I'd love to see more people do that.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think you're doing that well at Gloo these days.
Thanks.
It's kind of through like this service product offering, but it is a picture of that.
Yeah.
I think I talk about my kids too much on this, but like I just think about them so much. It comes to like matters of faith, and also like my kids are launching. Like we're in that phase where they're starting to kind of move out on their own. And how do you see? I'm talking about like high school age and younger. Like how do you see people in that age group engaging with engaging the world with the gospel, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Like how's that going to change in the next few years? Because I mean, these generation cycles are getting shorter and shorter. Not by age and biology, but like you'll have a 13-year-old that behaves very differently than a 10-year-old with some of these digital tools and the stuff that they're watching and looking at and engaging with. Like, what do you see happening there?
I think church planning on Minecraft is probably the biggest opportunity. um, I honestly don't know. I do see a very stark and tangible difference between like the way that we raise our kids and the way that other people raise their kids. I've been blown away
Like their friends'
specific.
families, you mean?
Yeah. Yeah. Specifically with my kids is like the fearlessness of like, talking about what they believe to their friends. And I mean, we're in Texas, we're in the South. And so everybody goes to church, right? So it's a
Not everybody.
natural, it's a natural conversation starter. Where do you go
Yeah.
to church?
Oh yeah.
And so I'm blown away by that. And so I don't know. I don't know how we capture that. Um, how you take advantage of it for the sake of the gospel, the sake of the generation that's coming up. You see things like the Unite movement out of Tennessee. I think
I don't know
that
that one.
they're having like these crazy revivals on college campuses where like, you know, I don't know the numbers, but it's like tens, if not hundreds of people at a time, like getting baptized in the university fountain, where it's like full on revival breaking out on these campuses. And it's pretty incredible, but that's definitely that's something that is happening. How they're communicating with their friends about the gospel, I have no idea. I wish I was closer to that. I feel old talking about it, but
Well, I feel like, all the reports say, people are more isolated than they've ever been. But
mhm.
at the same time, I feel like nothing's off limits.
Yeah, no, that's
Like
that's a good call out. Like people are starving for community, which we've talked about that for years. Is like the church
they're,
is community.
they're starving for a community, but they're also like talking about stuff that I would never talk about with even my closest friends when I was that age. You know, some of the obvious examples are like, you know, sexuality and stuff like that, which is a public, like it's a dialogue that's being pushed in our schools. I don't know about yours, but like politics and religion and all that stuff, kind of all of the taboos are on the table now.
Yeah.
Which I think just leads back to like, okay, I'm going to go kind of research and go look online and try to figure, you know, some of these questions out, which presents opportunity to engage with people in your community through these digital channels. So
Yeah.
I love the follow up stuff that you're doing. Real quick, like what about some of these AI acquisitions that you guys are doing? Is this like chatbot? Does it end with kind of aiding follow up capacity, or do we go beyond that? Do we get, you know, theological dialogue that people can rely on happening, you know, with AI? Where's this going? It's getting
Yes.
pretty good.
It's getting really good. 100% chatbots, right? Like, you talked about every church should have some sort of chatbot that has cataloged their index of content. Churches are content producers, right? That's one of the things that they do is they just kick out content in terms of sermons, in terms of blogs, in terms of books and articles and whatnot. It's like
Some of these
every church,
churches are getting incredibly proficient at that too.
yeah,
I mean, the
yeah,
cycle times are so fast. It's crazy.
right. So, you know, every church should have a chat bot where if I'm a visitor or even if I'm, a congregant in the church, I can go to the website and just ask a theological question and get answers back on, what my church believes about this thing and how we've preached on it over the years. I think that's incredibly valuable for follow up. Yeah, agents early in the process of like, just hearing these people out, figuring out who they are, what their question is, what team member they need to go to, et cetera. But I think we need to be very, very quick, to move it to the representative. So it's like every time I call American Airlines when I've got an issue with them, it's like representative. Like we need to make sure that we give that out to them because that's what people need. They want that community, they want that connection. And so we need to be very, very careful about just completely replacing for sure. But I think there's some things that we can do to take the load off of teams and pastors that are responding. But what did you ask about AI, the AI tools that we're
Yeah, just
that we're building?
yeah,
Yeah,
where's it
I
go?
mean, I said churches are content producers. Like everyone in the Christian ecosystem is a massive content producer. It's like they just kick out stuff. It's we've done it for years as believers.
Mm-hmm.
Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years. The number one connection that we have with our God is through His Word, and we've just written so much content around one verse. And so, is there a place that we can go to ask a question and get all the different answers? Yeah, there will be. Glue's working on that stuff.
Hmm.
And so it's really, really exciting stuff.
Like a library of commentary and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, I want you guys to do a "What's the Bible say?" Agent, where it's like any question you ask, that's the response. And then
Yeah. Yeah. What's the Bible say about that?
yeah, here's some places that you should look.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, great. I know you travel back and forth to Colorado to Glue quite a bit. Do you get out to ski at all? Are you skiing?
No, no. I think I was talking with a coworker about this the other day. It's like, I think if I went skiing now, I'm at the age where I have not done
No,
that activity. I'm going to blow a knee out and I'm going to be
no.
down for weeks. I won't be able to run. I won't be able to ride. It'll be bad news. So, and the lines in Colorado, we got very spoiled in Montana. It's
Lift
powder.
lines and stuff.
Yeah, it's powder. It's good skiing. Lift lines are short.
Nobody's there.
Yeah, ski
No,
Montana.
normally, I don't share these secrets, but you know, nobody listens to this, so. No, I invite people out all the time, including you. You guys need to come ski with us.
Blow a knee out.
It's looking good this year. It's been.
Yeah, I bet it is.
We'll come visit, and then we'll talk more about sharing the gospel with people. Chairlift, by the way, is a great place to share the gospel. You got somebody locked in for like 8, 9 minutes. They can't get away from you. That's why I
Captive
don't ski big
audience.
sky. They got those high speed lifts, you know.
Yeah.
I want the slow ones.
With the real slow ones.
Sounds really hard. Let me tell you about a time when I dealt with that as well. All right, Bryce. Thanks for doing this.
Yeah.
It's good to chat with you, and it's good to make it public. This episode is by request, by the way, from
Really?
Daniel Hall. He's the only one that requested it. But as soon as it publishes, I'll send it to you, Daniel. So shout out. I'll see if you listen to the end. This is a little Easter egg for Daniel to see if he's still on here.
There we go.
All right, buddy. I'll talk to you later.
All right. See ya.